Hi, I'm Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. It's Friday, April 17th, 2015. This is our weekly update. So what's been going on in the world? Well, in the markets today, the Dow was off 279 points and a variety of carnage in the other markets. You know, the markets, and I have to put quotes up, markets, because they don't behave like markets anymore. They go up, they go down, but we've been bouncing in this range since, I don't know, I guess it's been since about December. Somewhere between 2020 on the S&P and 2100. Now, the S&P has bumped its head against 2100 three times, and usually third time's a charm, and you would expect to see a big sell-off from here. No guarantee it's going to happen because these markets don't behave like they used to. Now, if the markets used to do what they used to do, they would be responding to really weak earnings out of companies being reported right now. GE had a really bad quarter, big losses there. Amex reported also down quite a bit. A lot of them are blaming, naturally, the higher dollar, which really doesn't help their overseas revenues, really doesn't help the overseas profitability, because a strong dollar means weak performance in another currency. So, this is where we're at right now, and I would love to tell you that, we could predict which way the market's going to go. Can't. And but we got a clue. We got a clue as to exactly who it is that's running around buying this market and making it go back up again every time we have a little bit of weakness. Now, one thing we know for sure is the Federal Reserve trots out an official every time the market even gets slightly weak. Now, the first question we have to ask is, what is the Fed afraid of that they have to trot out an official to reassure the markets every time they're down a tiny bit? Nothing that historically would have ever even caused anybody to say anything other than, oh, I guess it went down today. But the Fed's trotting out these officials who are saying, whoa, we might keep interest rates low for even longer. We might even be more patienter than we said. So that's the environment we're in. And the second piece of evidence we have is that the New York Federal Reserve is putting a whole trading desk in Chicago. Now, they said they're worried about natural disasters. That was their reason for doing this. I think I know what they're up to. We know that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME, that's where most and certainly all of the critical stock futures, commodity futures, other things like that, all the futures are traded on the CME as well as options. So options on commodities and equities, things like that. So the Federal Reserve is openly putting a trading floor near the place where futures are traded most aggressively. And so that's another sort of piece of evidence that says maybe the Fed is being a little bit more direct. But here's kind of the nail in the coffin on this whole thing for me. Ben Bernanke, the former Fed chairman, recently took another job this last week, just a couple days ago, with a company called Citadel, which happens to be one of the largest high-frequency trading firms out there and electronic trading funds that's out there. These people are, if I was going to be the Federal Reserve and I wanted to have the market go in a direction I needed it to go, I would employ a firm like Citadel, somebody who had capability and was plugged into all the major markets with a high-frequency trading network who could, if necessary, throw $1 billion right through the front door on futures and options and things like that. I mean, it's not sufficient to say I have $1 billion, I want to goose the market. Who's going to do it for you? Well, it would be not unthinkable to me if you were going to partner with somebody, it would have to be with somebody like Citadel. So here's a former chairperson of the Federal Reserve taking a job with one of the companies that this just optically doesn't look good, olfactorily smells really bad. Now, here's why I think the Federal Reserve has been monkeying around in markets. They have to. I would. They have to achieve their policy. And if I was in their shoes, I would be doing this. That's why I suspect so strongly they have the means, the motive, the opportunity to be monkeying with our markets. And listen, I think they're doing it for reasons that make a lot of sense to them. Like they've rationalized it all away. But now that we're this far down the rabbit hole, we have this new two-parter at the site by Brian Preddy, which talks about interest rates and where we are in this interest rate cycle, because literally for every single recession the country has ever had, the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates in response to that. Well, we're at 0. They're talking about raising rates, but what'll that be? 0.25%? That doesn't give you much headroom if you want to lower them again. So what would they do if we got into a recession? Now, is a recession unthinkable? Well, the Atlanta Fed, in their most recent forecast for what they think the country went through in the United States in this first quarter, is 0.1% GDP growth. I mean, that might as well be 0. That's just pure stall speed. And the economy has lots of signs suggesting it's weakening further. Things like consumer spending, factory orders, a number of indicators like that. So if we go into this next recession, then what? Have you thought? I mean, really, seriously, what would the Fed do? Because they've goosed the markets. They've even installed, new trading floors in Chicago so that they can be closer to the action. They've goosed the markets as much as they can, but the economy still hasn't responded. And I guess Japan's lesson was the object lesson of the past century, which is that you can throw all the QE money in you want, but when you have too much debt, game's over. We have too much debt. That's what the problem is. So what's the Fed going to do next? That's the discussion we're having now. We've had other fascinating discussions about the myth of progress. Is progress dead? Is technology dead? That last podcast interview with John Michael Greer, very interesting conversation. Started to go into really what is the military capability of the United States. Interesting conversation. Also looking at ocean acidification and what that means. Taking a big peek at that at the site. So that's what we have going on. I wish you all the best, and if you want to subscribe to this channel, you can do it there. And until next week, I'm Chris Martenson. I'll see you then.